What's up guys, Ben Milliken here, back for Mystery Tackle Box. Today we're talking about lipless crankbaits. You know, it's one of the best baits you can possibly be throwing whenever that water cools down and there's that big migration of shad back to the back of the creeks, or even just as the water cools down in lakes that don't have shad. The lipless crankbait is really tough to beat. You know, another thing you can do in the fall to mix it up and get more bites from those fish that have seen so much of the real thing is to change your noise up. These are two different baits that'll be coming out in the mystery tackle boxes around the country. One is the Booyah hard knocker and one is the Booyah one knocker. So the difference is this has your typical whole bunch of BBs in there, really loud high-pitched rattle. And this guy right here, the one knocker, just has one little knocking plate inside of its head. So that's gonna give the fish a totally different sound. That knocking sound a lot of times is really good when that bite's super tough, and sometimes you're having to use that yo-yo motion. It's just a different sound those fish have not really heard that much when everyone else in the water for years has been throwing this regular BB rattle. So let's talk about why the lipless crankbait is such an effective bait during the fall months. Well, first of all, you know, the bass are following the shad, the big migration to the back of the creek. So a lot of shad bait fish are up a lot shallower in that cooling off water, and those bass are right on their tails. The lipless crankbait presents a great bait to cast a long ways. You know, it's a bait you can bomb cast and really burn it, cover a ton of water. And when those bass have all the different shad in the world they can chase and eat the real thing, it's going to take a lot of long casts covering a ton of water to be able to catch a fish. So not only can you fish this bait really effectively in that shallow water where the bass have just moved up to with those really long bomb casts, it also has a super tight shimmy wiggle to it. So as the water cools down, the bass's metabolism, although they are chasing shad and eating a lot of shad, the metabolism slows down too. And that's when you really want tighter moving baits, or baits that don't have as much action. You know, this obviously fits into the category of a bait that has action, but it's such a tight shimmy. Whenever the bite gets super tough, that tight shimmy is way more natural than a big wide wobbling crankbait or a chatterbait or something like that, and it gets you a ton more bites. So let's talk about where to throw this lipless crankbait during the fall months. So lakes where there's that big shad movement and you have a ton of bait fish in the lake moving back up into the creeks, obviously you want to follow those and be around them whenever you're searching for bass. So what I look for is the most major, flattest creeks on the lake, where there's a super defined creek channel that leads way back into the back of a creek. A lot of times it's leading back into only like a 6-inch to a foot deep flat. Those are the perfect areas to throw this bait. Now, to get a little bit more specific than that, you want to cover a ton of water, but what you really want to look for is any type of channel swing where that channel bends around and a big point comes out. If there's any type of grass, a stump, any type of lay down or isolated cover, even a dock that's right there, that's an excellent ambush spot. You know, you're gonna get a ton of those 1 to 2 pound bass that are chasing shad and busting them like crazy, but the real true giants are a lot lazier and gonna take their time to get a meal for themselves. So you wanna pick out the areas where those big bass can sit on really specific targets and ambush their prey. Now, there's a ton of controversy and personal preference that goes into what type of tackle you like to use whenever you're throwing a lipless crankbait. You know, when you're in the spring, the bite is almost 100% ripping out of grass. So that presents a really tough opportunity where you need something with the backbone to rip it out, but it needs to be a soft enough rod where you can use it with treble hooks. And although I do like to throw these around grass in the fall whenever I can, a lot of times you're just fishing a giant shallow flat. That's when I throw these anyways. So to me, the most important characteristics of tackle to throw these on in the fall, you're fishing really shallow usually, so I want a 7:1 gear ratio. I'll bump that up to a 7:1 to keep that bait high in the water column and keep it from bogging down in a lot of the leaves and everything else that's silted in. And as far as a rod choice goes, I'll go with my typical 7'6" crankbait rod, usually a medium heavy, moderate action rod. And as far as line goes, fluorocarbon, 100% fluorocarbon all the time in the fall. A lot of guys like to bump that up to braid or a stiffer rod when they're ripping out of the grass a bunch in the spring. But for me, you want something that's going to launch this bait as far as you can. And after that, you want it to load up and really be nice and mushy for when that bass comes up behind and engulfs this bait with little tiny treble hooks. To me, that's the absolute perfect setup. And of course, you're fishing this in shallow water with a fast reel and a rod you can hold up in the air. You also want to help yourself out the most you can by bumping that up to 17 or 20 pound fluorocarbon line. The bigger the line diameter, the higher it'll sit in the water column. You know, another thing I like to do in the fall, when the fish have just a ton of the actual thing to eat around them, I like to vary my retrieve a little bit. So I'll throw two different types of retrieves. One is just a long bomb cast with a medium fast to fast retrieve. I'm just burning that thing in straight, and every time I bump it into something, you know, maybe I'll slow it down for a second or I'll speed it up for a second to try to get that reaction strike. But the second retrieve that I found can get a lot more bites when it's a really tough bite is a big, long yo-yo retrieve. And what I mean by that is bomb casting it all the way out there as far as you can, and then just pumping your rod, take up the slack, reel it up, take up the slack, and that causes the bait to kind of fall and shimmy as it goes down, and then you're kind of ripping it up. And I think it simulates a frantic bait fish, something that's trying to get away from the fish, you know, or it's just yo-yoing, falling down in front of its face, and then it's ripping up, causing that reaction strike. But that really tends to get a lot more bites in the fall. Hopefully these tips I gave you today with these lipless crankbaits can help you get out, throw these a little bit more this fall and catch a bunch of different fish on them. Remember, this tighter shimmy, different noises, and a little bit different retrieve can be all it takes to get the bites from those big bass as we move into the later fall months. Thanks a ton for watching, guys.